Good afternoon. Happy hump day. Is it hump day? It's Wednesday. Happy hump day. Yes, that's 2 weeks in a row. I hit it on the same day. Welcome back to Go FUD Yourself. JD Gagnon here. My good friend Kiara. What are we talking about today?
Only crypto arms race. I have refrained for almost a week from calling it that. I have refrained from integrating international news and pitting countries against each other, and I will refrain no more. I cannot help myself. We are only talking about the crypto arms race. We're going to talk about Hong Kong, UAE, de-dollarization, Singapore, UK, USA. It's too much. We can't not report on it.
Let's do it. All right, welcome back. Okay, before we get into it, just wait, time out. So
I want to see before we get into it.
No, you know when you have like a New Year's resolution and you're like, oh, I'm gonna stop eating like crap for like a week, and then when that week is up, you're like, oh my god, I'm gonna eat all the crap and then some that I missed out on the last week. I feel like that's kind of what we're doing today. We abstained for a whole week from the crypto arms race, and now we're gonna make up for it and then some, which is cool.
I don't have New Year's resolutions because if you want to do something, just do it.
Yeah, I mean.
So we're not going to stave off the crypto arms race anymore. We're just going to talk about it every day, which is kind of my first point. This is a conglomeration of what's happened in the last like 3-4 days, yeah. But we didn't report on crypto arms race for.
What did you call it? A conglomeration? Yeah. Either I'm learning a new word or that word doesn't make sense. Probably the former. I'm probably learning a new word. Is that a real word?
Yeah, it's probably nonsense. I have a propensity to do that. So.
And I called you out on it, so there you
go. But we don't report on crypto arms race every day, and there's lots of international news in different languages that we simply don't see or doesn't come up to us because people aren't hashtagging crypto arms race. I don't know. But if you were watching and you think something's not happening if you think something is happening in your country that we should talk about, you should let me know. I've had a couple of people from Turkey reach out, DM me about things that are going on in their country, about CBDCs, that kind of thing. And that allows us to report on kind of a candid bird's eye view of what's actually going on because it's very limited, right? We're in North America and we get North American news. And sometimes I do go through and I use Google Translate for French or German or an Asiatic publication, but it's still really limited. I'm only getting a portion of the story. So if you have other things you want us to talk about, you have to tell me.
Yeah, send a note. Believe it or not, she responds.
I do. I can't help myself.
Okay,
the first one is really interesting.
Wait. I got to talk about our newest sponsor. So the pod is now sponsored by Lamborghini. So that's where the merch is coming from. They don't know that they've sponsored us yet, but
let them know.
I mean, I heard this is how you get these big sponsors is by repping them, and then they're going to be like, whoa, this guy's wicked. He reps our stuff. We're going to send him more stuff.
You know, Psycho Bunny actually liked and retweeted. So
what? Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, shit. Hey, that's kind of cool.
So maybe they would jump on that train. I'd wear Psycho Bunny stuff.
Maybe they're gonna. Yeah, I love Psycho Bunny stuff. Anyways, maybe they're gonna send us some shit.
Lululemon shockingly did not. Okay.
Okay. Sorry. Now all my nonsense is over. Let's move on.
Okay. Last week I talked about, or maybe 2 weeks ago now, we talked about the balkanization of the dollar and how we were going to see a lot of these like smaller dollars becoming more prevalent and more interesting. And there's some more news on that, but now they're calling it de-dollarization. And so that's from BRICS and from ASEAN. So this is really interesting because this is almost the opposite. Balkanization was saying that each of them would have their own CBDC or each of them would have their own currency and they're not going to be using the USD to back any of them. And this is actually saying that some of these like BRICS and ASEAN will have a shared currency. And they're actually looking to onboard ASEAN into BRICS so that they'll all have one shared currency that is not the US dollar.
I think it's actually the yuan, isn't it? Like the at least
I think it's going to be the digital yuan, but yeah. I wasn't able to find any confirmation thereof.
I'm not sure they know. Like part of this, I think, is kind of political peacocking. Like, you know, it's kind of like China's made a really public point of poking the hibernating bear that is the US. Hibernating / probably no longer breathing or at least sentient, as in Biden. But I feel like they're lobbing a lot of these kind of implications at the U.S. and it's we have to try to sift through that. So in the spirit of dispelling FUD, I mean, is this a real risk? Yes, I think so. I think it's an existential risk right now to the U.S. economy, North American economies, Western economies. I think this totally changes the way that we can enforce global sanctions and so on, which is the reason that we've gotten here. If we wouldn't have weaponized the dollar for sanctions as willy-nilly as we have, without any other types of reinforcement, like meaningful military action or meaningful trade, like not using them in our supply chain and some of these other things that we can do domestically as opposed to using the dollar as a sanction mechanism. But anyways, I mean, it puts the US and again, many Western countries in pretty precarious situation, I think. And so should we be worried about this? I think so. Like, I think it's not a risk that we can ignore, but so is it imminent? No.
Well, it's pretty interesting because I mean, I'm thrilled you said, is it imminent? So we've talked about propaganda a couple of times on this show because it's real, right? We get different messaging than other countries get. That's part of why I say, if you have messaging that you want us to report on, I'm happy to, because there's no other way for me to find it, right? And I was able to find a couple of Chinese and Russian excerpts about BRICS and about de-dollarization. Obviously, that wasn't a direct translation, the term de-dollarization, but they say that it will be a paradigm shift, right? They're saying this is happening now and nobody can stop us. And this is what's going on. And we're powerful and it is going to be an immediate shift. And all of the North American news outlets say paradigm shifts take a long time. This is going to be years. And like, I don't know, maybe it'll just be a middle ground, right? I'm not saying that I have the answer to that, but we do need to dispel our own cognitive bias here as well, saying like, oh, we are powerful and we are okay, because maybe it will be a week, right? Or maybe it'll be 10 years. I don't know.
I mean, the counter argument to that, to support you actually, is that it probably has been years in the making for this paradigm shift, probably decades, ever since I would say ever since September 11th, 2001, the U.S. foreign policy has shifted drastically in the way that we're intervening in all of these other countries. I use we loosely, but the way that the US and other allies are intervening in other countries for the forever wars, and sanctions have been plentiful, and they're trying to police things via economics, which works to a certain extent, of course. But an argument can be made. It's been decades in the making. Technology has, the technology in particular that backs digital currencies, CBDCs, exists and has evolved and is reputable now. So yeah, I mean, it very likely could be imminent. That's the counter argument to my original argument. It's probably not going to be like a light switch where all of a sudden the dollar is just no longer relevant. But I mean, there's quite a few of these discussions happening and quite a few public commitments to trading.
So it probably won't be a light switch, but it might feel like one.
Sure.
Right? Like if we continue to have propaganda that says there's no problem, there's no problem, there's no problem, and then now there's a problem, the average person isn't going to see it coming. Somebody who's wrapped up in the news, they probably, like you say, have watched it be in the making for a couple of decades. Whereas to, your average worker, they're going to be like, what the heck is this?
What happened? Why is the US dollar collapsing? Why are we hyperinflating it right now?
Exactly.
It will definitely lead to some less than desirable outcomes, even if it's only a partial de-dollarization. If it does balkanize as opposed to entirely shift to the digital yuan or whatever they decide to create there.
So interesting.
It's definitely going to have some impacts on the U.S. So I would say the U.S. and most Western nations. So let's pay attention.
So on the topic of world powers, this next one's interesting because we've seen a lot of news come out about UAE trying to become a crypto hub. And we've seen a lot of news about how Hong Kong is positioned exactly where they need to be to become a crypto hub. And what's fascinating about this is people keep reporting on it with no new information. But now they're pitting the UAE and Hong Kong against each other in the news. And I don't really know what to do with that information other than say, like, what FUD?
Yeah, I think they're pitting them against each other to hopefully get one of them to speed up, because we still don't really have, we've got a lot of signaling, but we don't have any like meaningful clarity in any of these jurisdictions that makes things attractive.
So the UAE has probably the most clarity of anybody at this time.
True. Yeah, true. Absolutely true. And they are working on more clarity, obviously. This is where I kind of don't really take this at face value, at least personally. The Hong Kong is very much connected. It's the dog wagged by the Chinese tail in many ways. And that's not a secret, that they have significant, if not unilateral, influence over Hong Kong. And so, I mean, you're maybe getting rid of one risk, regulatory risk, and you're adding massive extortion risk, I think, from government and so on. And that to me is not a viable trade-off. Dubai, on the other hand, has both made foreign investment a lot more straightforward and predictable, and made residency and all of these things a hell of a lot more attainable. Hong Kong does have that too, but Hong Kong is a very small area with a lot of freaking people there. Trying to live there is insanely expensive. It's near impossible for many people. So anyways, I'm supportive of all of these countries globally trying to do something. Is Hong Kong going to be the answer?
Okay, so some people are saying that Singapore is the answer.
Yeah, Singapore could be, which is different. Singapore is a different case. I think they don't have. There's a lot of Asian influence, Chinese influence there, but I don't think they have the same direct connection to CCP and their policies. Singapore is a little further away. It's more in the Southeast Asian kind of area. I think there's a lot of positive sentiment and momentum in Southeast Asia, probably more than most other jurisdictions. They're kind of saying, hey, this is going to happen.
Like acknowledging that I'm not operating in Singapore. Singapore at face value seems to have some regulations spelled out already, which has enabled a number of crypto companies to work there effectively. But also, they are really strict about their regulation. I mean, if you've been to Singapore, you'll know that they're strict about chewing gum. They have so many people living on one island that they have set rules. And if you don't follow those rules, you're out. And so in the news right now, we're seeing positive sentiment towards two companies leaving Singapore. So one is ZipMex. ZipMex is basically going bankrupt and maybe got bought and maybe didn't get bought. And they missed one of their payments and it's a big deal. So they asked for how they can do that. Work is set out. There's no.
You are rugging again. You are rugging again. Okay. So just filling in while you figure out your connection issues. So here's my major concern as an entrepreneur. It seems like you're back now. Here's my major concern as an entrepreneur with Dubai, with UAE, with Singapore, with all of these small jurisdictions that are trying to make friendly crypto regulation, is that at the end of the day, the vast majority of investable assets and activity comes from North America and Europe. That's where the vast majority of financial resources are, with the exception of China and some other Asian countries. Of course, they're not insignificant, but so if you're compliant in Singapore, cool. Your target market is now Singapore. So unless you're also compliant in other areas, it's not quite that simple. And so where I'm paying the most attention, so that's problem number one. Problem number one is cool. So our company is domiciled in UAE. Ours isn't, but let's say it was. That means that we can operate in the UAE in a compliant way. That means nothing for any other country at all. So one of the problems that is going to arise here, and this is not new, but one of the problems that's going to arise is if we have fragmented regulation globally, if there's not some consistent standard, which eventually there will be. Eventually you'll see movement towards a point of singularity over time, generally led by the US and others enforcing this stuff.
Or BRICS or ASEAN.
or BRICS or ASEAN. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, there's some of them are big enough jurisdictions that, I mean, you could make a competitive argument, but some of these small places, like a single island or a single country.
Well, that's exactly what Luno is saying. So Luno is withdrawing from Singapore by June 20th. If you're in Singapore, you have until June 19th to remove all your assets. And the argument is essentially we are serving many other jurisdictions. We have a much easier time serving many other jurisdictions. Yes, Singapore, you've made it clear how we can serve, but it isn't worth our time. So it's just kind of interesting that there is positive sentiment about what Singapore is doing, even though it is resulting in this heavy regulation is resulting in people leaving. Too much upfront cost while other places are still currently not regulated.
Yeah, agreed. The other thing that I think about here, and this probably goes to the Luno and ZipMex, they probably didn't say it in as many words, but one of the other benefits of Western capitalist environments is that there's the legal system is also, at least up until 10 minutes ago, we all believed in the unbiased nature of the legal system in many of these countries. At least I did. I did until like 10 minutes ago. But I mean, if there's a problem, that there are means by which that are supposed to be fair, where you can try to prove your case and so on. The problem with a lot of these other places where it's communist rule or monarchies or whatever. Authoritarian power, you don't have a whole hell of a lot of recourse if they decide to change something.
Okay, so weird segue, but you're going to love it. There's some positive sentiment about this too, but I personally am not that positive about it. So Britain could see crypto-specific regulation in the next 12 months. The quote about it is basically that because of Brexit, they're no longer attributed to the EU in their rules, so they can now go back to their own rule book in the UK. The positive argument is that they can have regulation faster because it'll be less bureaucratic. But of course, the negative argument there is power and control. So, so it's kind of a weird, people are like, yeah, regulation, we're going to have some clarity. But also they have literally come out and said, we've got the ability to move in an agile way. Great. But we're also able to do this because we're now in control of our own rule book and we don't have to answer to anybody anymore. So I don't know.
Most countries think that. Of course, the US would say the same thing. We don't really give a shit about what other countries have to say. What we care about is what US regulators say. US people, that is. I care deeply about what other regulators have to say. But yeah, this is. I don't know what to make of all of this. Like, I mean, this is an issue no matter what. It's an issue in the banking system in the UK, in America, in Hong Kong, in Singapore. Banks have been wildly successful. There's a lot of multinational banks that participate in Hong Kong and Singapore and Malaysia and Dubai and all these other places. Like, they found ways to deal with it. So I'm not saying that this will be the reason that this doesn't work. I just think it's definitely not pretty. And I was actually talking with Patrick, who's been on the show before, a good friend, last night, about the relationship between barriers to entry and technical innovation. So if the barrier to entry is too low, then you get a whole bunch of noise and garbage. If the barrier to entry is too high, which is where we're heading right now, then you get way less technical innovation. Because, as an example, if you wanted to start a regulated financial business in the United States, I mean, you're talking like a meaningful one, like a new bank. If you wanted to get a new banking charter, or if you wanted to become an investment bank and all of that stuff, you're talking years of regulatory hurdles. This is assuming not in crypto. So where the rules are clear, it's years and tens of millions of dollars. I mean, if you've got a new idea and it takes you 2 years and multiple tens of millions just to launch it, how the hell do you test MVPs? How do you even get product market fit? Like, how do you validate anything? And so this is another problem that I can see arising, is that if we go too far down this complexity road, we're going to invariably, yes, we'll have rules, but it'll stifle innovation. And so,
well, this is interesting because all these rules that they're making right now in the UK are basically for stablecoins. So they aren't for your average mon pod DeFi shop. Yeah, Ma and Pa DeFi shop. That's where we're at now.
Is there such a thing? Is there a Ma and Pa DeFi shop? I don't know. I suppose.
Much for that depth that I'm apparently making.
You're a Ma, I'm a Pa, I guess. Depends if our kids are born in the 60s. But anyways, yeah, you know, the stablecoin regulation, there's hearings today, actually, in Congress also in America about stablecoin regulation and so on. And some people we know are actually testifying there, which is cool. But excuse me. Again, that kind of tells me that, like, if we're focused on CBDCs before figuring out a solution for the market that already exists,
exactly.
What does that say about priorities? Priorities are oversight, control, oversight, control, and power. That's what they want. They want a CBDC with which they have oversight, control, and power, and then everything else falls underneath that.
Okay, so do you want to know what else they want control and power of?
Everything. But yes.
I made this joke yesterday about colonized crypto. Maybe it was 2 days ago. Do you remember that?
No.
Okay. Well, I made some jokes about how the UK is great at colonizing, and maybe that's what they'll do with their CBDC, and maybe that's how they'll become a world power again.
Right.
So they have started that. They are now, lots of them are expanding into other nations. This specific one, really interesting because it is related to CBDCs and it's related to the UK new regulation. This one company called Unlimint has moved into Nigeria with the support of the Central Bank of Nigeria. And this is a big deal because you might remember from our CBDCs episode that the Nigerians don't like the CBDC. So the government is continuing to push for power and control in this way, and is even bringing in like foreign contracts to try to push the CBDC when there have been literal protests in the street against it. So we see power and control from one government that then is reaching out to another group, another government, to support that power and control, which is kind of the beginning of that colonization cycle again.
Yeah, I agree there. I think it's one of the ways that the Nigerian government can get what they want without having to say that they went ahead and did their own CBDC. So this is kind of like, it's a little bit of like sleight of hand, I think. Mm-hmm. A good friend of ours, a partner in one of our projects, is of Nigerian descent. And so we actually talk about Nigeria quite a bit. And there's a lot of connections from Nigeria to the UK, of course, which is why this makes so much sense. The vast majority of a remittance from the UK to other countries, not the vast majority, but a very significant portion of it goes to Nigeria. Yeah. And so, and the same is true in the reverse. So that, like, a very significant portion of incoming remittance to Nigeria comes from the UK. And so this to me kind of makes sense. Like, I can see this would be the natural progression of this type of relationship. Again, the CBDC is like, I've been saying this, like there's some implementations that could be useful, but it's just a slippery slope. And this is, again, more of that example, right? Like, so who knows what arrangements the Nigerian central bank made with this fintech company in terms of oversight, data sharing, policing, like, who knows? And that's where the problems are. Maybe there's none right now, but in a few months, once this scales and gets a certain amount of stickiness, then they might say, well, if you want to maintain this license, you must share all user information and user activity with the Nigerian government.
Precisely.
Oh, perfect.
A little bit of more positive sentiment, despite all of this FUD, is the UK Burger King account. Did you see this? I have to throw this in. So whatever, they have a hilarious social media account. Like, it's actually quite outlandish. You should go look at it if you are into outlandish social media accounts. It's kind of like the old Taco Bell account from 10 years ago. Yeah. They just post whatever they want. And they've been kind of making fun of Elon and also posting things about like a BK coin or a Bytecoin and alluding that they're going to be moving into crypto. And it's surprisingly controversial on UK Twitter. Some people are really mad about it, saying that it's obviously not true and that they're misleading and they're like forcing market movement. And other people think that it's obviously true and they're like awaiting the Burger King token so that they can purchase it for what, I don't know. But there's like, despite all of this regulation going on and despite all of the FUD about how countries are maybe, one and against each other, there are still these fun retail use cases. And I think it's important to note that we are looking at regulating at this really high level, but it isn't necessarily impacting our everyday market movement. Yeah,
this I think is just awesome. I like it when people kind of shed some light on, play with some of these concepts a little bit, because we hear so much negative nonsense all day, every day in the news cycles. It's kind of interesting to see somebody being a little bit, being hilarious about this. Like, are they actually launching a token? I doubt it, especially in this environment. If you're a multinational company the size of Burger King, you're probably going to wait for a minute. I could see them doing something weird with NFTs.
I don't know, we got those weird Bugatti eggs, didn't we?
It's an NFT though, not a
that's true.
Not a utility token, but or a means of exchange.
Why do you assume it would have utility? It's Burger King.
It depends. I don't think anything at Burger King has any utility. They're never going to be a sponsor of merch for me because I won't wear it. But first, I don't eat meat, and second, I don't eat garbage. But all of that being said, I think it's fun. Satire is fun. I think there's a lot of heavy topics in the space right now, and Elon and his Doge trolls and stuff I think are interesting too. What I don't like about Elon and some of his comments is it actually moves the market, like meaningfully, and I'm not sure that that's ideal. This is more bring
us back to critical thinking, right? Yeah. Exactly the argument you just outlined. Now would be a bad time for a multinational corporation to launch a token. It's very unlikely they're going to launch a token. A social media intern who tweets about the Super Mario Bros. Movie made a joke about Bitcoin. Use your critical thinking. Don't let it impact your strategies, right?
Yeah. I do tend to agree with you on this one, but I guess we'll see. It's interesting. Just
maybe they'll do it. Who the fuck knows?
Read everything with a grain of salt. There we go. Okay, last but
America. Are you ready for America?
I'm ready.
Are you? Okay, America's like real FUD. So first of all, the SEC stuff was yesterday. I'm not reporting on that anymore. We had 2 days of the SEC. I'm tired of it. But things aren't going great. So we have the UK saying that they want to have crypto regulations so that it's easier to invest there. We have Singapore putting out regulations so that it's easier to invest there. We have Hong Kong and UAE putting out regulations so that it's easier and more straightforward to invest there. And in America, we're just doing the opposite. Like, we're just being politicized and fighting with one another, and also like attacking people. I said before that there were almost 10 celebrities last year who got served by the SEC in crypto relation. People are attacking Gensler, the head of the SEC, the CFTC, and the SEC are fighting. It's just a mess. And then yesterday, a U.S. attorney who was involved in crypto shadow, or an executive who was involved in crypto shadow banking, is going to jail, which probably makes sense. But I don't know if this is the moment where you want to be making an example of somebody.
Well, I think that's kind of been their MO, though. I think the MO has been, let's make examples of people so that we create some sort of fear that forces everybody to adhere to rules that are really obscure and hard to. So, I mean, I have to bring this up, but I mean, one of the things that Gensler has said repetitively is that in his view, which currently is the view that matters, with respect to regulation, that most of these assets, most crypto projects are in non-compliance. Problem is, you can charge all these people all you want, but if there's no path to compliance, then what the hell are people supposed to do? Like, here's another example. So they're not approving many requests for regulated platforms for crypto assets. Like, they're just not. So let's say that everybody said, okay, Gensler thinks everything's a security, let's go in and register. Well, if that was to happen today, not a single exchange would host your asset anymore. Zero. You can't do anything with your crypto asset then if it's registered as a security. A. B, the other problem is nobody is going in to get information from the SEC, because everybody that's gone in has turned around and been served with Wells notices based on the information they provided while trying to figure out how to be compliant. Like, I mean, the situation right now is like, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, because there's no meaningful path. And this is what I've been saying forever, that the path is probably going to be one that, at least at first, none of us like. Fine. Like, whatever. But like, let's actually talk about a meaningful transition. Like they're saying the rules are clear. They've been clear since the, you know, for the last 90 years, since the 30s when the Securities Act, well, yeah, maybe. Like, but a lot of the things that you're implying, like they never could have even fathomed in the 30s the shit that we're seeing today. So those rules like just don't directly apply, obviously. But
here's another interesting component of it is we saw a little bit of this in the SEC committee hearing yesterday, but they were asking Gensler, you know, why are you trying to talk about emissions? Why are you trying to talk about things that are outside of your skill set? And this has resulted in a number of crypto companies looking to use the Supreme Court doctrine, basically the major questions doctrine, take a look at it, which outlines exactly what every area of the government is supposed to be doing. Yeah. And the SEC, if we aren't securities and if we haven't been labeled securities, shouldn't be dealing with crypto. And so people are looking to kind of wormhole this a little bit. And I don't know that that's going to be effective, but it's interesting to see people dancing around trying to avoid what they think they might know is coming.
Well, and that's the thing, like if everything is securities, let's say, I don't think that's the case, but let's just say that seems to be what they're trying to do in the US. If everything is securities, I mean, unless you want to completely crush the industry that you're trying to save, or at least trying to allow to exist, if you don't want to completely crush it, you have to create some form of like, here's a day where shit must be in compliance, and if you're in compliance by that day and may not have been before, as long as you weren't doing anything grossly negligent, then you're fine. Like there's got to be some sort of transition plan. Like we didn't think everything was securities until 10 minutes ago. Now that maybe some people think that things are securities, I still don't, and we don't have clarity on that, of course. But like there's got to be a way. Like there's got to be a way to transition without just killing every business that exists. Now, if you put your tin hat on, which we've talked about a few times, and I know we're bumping up on time here, but if you put your tin hat on, that could be the point, because wipe out all the smaller participants by not really creating a path to compliance, and in come your incumbents who can then just regulate the shit out of everything, and it'll be a massive land grab in the US, and that'll be not very fun. You are muted. You're muted. You're muted.
Sorry. To wrap up, everywhere in the world is trying to make regulation reasonable, accessible, and possible so they can become a crypto hub, except America and Canada.
Yeah.
Is that what I mean,
as much as we hate what Canada is doing, at least they've said all crypto in Canada is considered securities. You must. But what they did was what I'm suggesting.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen very often that I agree with anything Canada does, but that's what I'm suggesting. They said, hey, you have a month, way too short, but you have a month. If you're existing and operating currently, you have 1 month to come into compliance. If you make it in compliance, then you're allowed to continue as a going concern. And I mean, we have to seriously look at that in other jurisdictions, in my opinion.
That's the FUD today, JD. That's it. That's all.
That's the FUD. Okay, everybody, if you love the banter on this nonsense, or even if you hate it, but you just like my face, which is pretty likely.
Yeah, if you watch this on mute, totally fine.
Yeah, totally fine. Like, share, subscribe, do all that shit. Obviously, we're on episode 45 today. We are not slowing down. We're not stopping. We're going to keep doing this, and hopefully, add some serious value over the next weeks, months, and years to the space. So help us out, support us. Kiara, go find yourself.
Go find yourself, JD.